Hello, guys. Again, this is Nick Christopher with Mob Tales. Today, we're going to be talking about guys who turn their button in and become associated with the government, helping to bring down the mob. So, the guys we're going to discuss today, and I'm going to give my own opinions or thoughts on this, because the word rat, I don't really believe is a proper term, and I'll explain why. First, guys, I'm going to talk about it. Some of you guys all know. Some of you guys may not like him. Some guys may like him. You know, it all depends how you look at it. Sammy Gravano, or Sammy the Bull. Now, Sammy Gravano was a big shot, underboss with John Gotti during the beginning 80s into the 90s, even mid 70s, actually. And now Gravano turned state's evidence around 1992, I think it was. And people call him a rat, call him he was a bad guy, he was no good. All right, well, he became a rat for a very good reason. He was a powerful guy that made tons of money. Now, why would a guy walk away from something that's making so much money? And why would he not, take the hit, go to prison, and do what he's supposed to do, right? That's what he takes the oath for, right? But when he heard tapes that the FBI played for him that were recorded in an apartment above the Ravenite, and John Gotti basically was, stating that he was going to take out Sammy, more or less, not so many words, that he was looking to take him out because he felt like Sammy was encroaching on his position as boss. He thought Sammy was trying to take over, which really wasn't the case. Because whatever John Gotti wanted, Sammy did. And I'm not totally defending Sammy for doing what he did, but there's a quote that a gentleman told me who recently passed away about 2 years ago, and I went to his funeral. Sonny Francis, or John Sonny Francis, who was one of the most powerful guys in the Colombo family. And Sonny said this to me one time. He said, a lot of people call people rats, snitches, canaries. They say these things. But I say, until you spend a time in my shoes, then you can talk. In other words, unless you're in somebody else's shoes to know what they went through and understand what they're doing, you shouldn't be passing judgment. And that's what Sonny was trying to tell me, which to me made a lot of sense. Now, another gentleman I can talk about, who was a close friend of mine, it was Billy Catolo. Billy Catolo Jr. is the son of Wild Bill Catolo. Wild Bill Catolo was a captain in the Colombo family, and he was involved in the Colombo War between Carmine Persico and Vicarina. And Vicarina is a friend of somebody I knew, I grew up with actually. I knew the whole family. Now, Catolo, Wild Bill, after the war was over, they killed Wild Bill. And they killed Wild Bill because Carmine was afraid, because of Wild Bill's power, that he was looking to, take over, become boss, whatever, even though Carmine was in prison and was never getting out. Because the Persicos always love to always have control over the family, regardless if he's in prison or not. But Wild Bill really didn't have any, desire to be boss of the family, but they thought he was. And since he was on the other side of the war against Persico, they killed him. Now, Bill Jr., when he found out that they killed his father, you would say, oh, they killed your father, that's just the way the world is, the mob is, that's the life, deal with it. Well, Bill Jr. wasn't a made guy, he was an associate under his father, but he was well respected in the family. But Bill felt that it was wrong and inappropriate to take his father out, where he was no longer a threat. The war was over. So he felt that was wrong. So he was caught between a rock and a hard place pretty much. Because usually when they whack out the father, they usually take out the son. Because they figured the son's going to look for revenge. Which Bill Jr. was looking for that. He was thinking about it. You know, revenge in a violent sense. But evidently, he decided that revenge in putting guys away would be a lot more satisfying and less of a danger to him and his family. So I understand why Bill Jr. did that. And I'm not just saying that because he's my friend, but I understand why he did it. Because he was, you know, look, he could have been the next one on the hit parade, as they say. Another guy I'm going to discuss is another friend of mine. His name is Andrew DiDonato. Now, Andrew DiDonato was with the Gambino family. He was under Nicky Caruso. Nicky Caruso was a captain with John Gotti. Now, Nicky Caruso was known as a cheap captain. He didn't take care of his men. He was very cheap. He didn't really, all he wanted was give me money, give me money. When's the next envelope coming in? And Andrew DiDonato, who was a solid guy, made guy, crazy as hell. Matter of fact, he shot a guy in broad daylight in the street because this guy was hitting on his girl. Imagine. Walked up over the street and shot him in the street. Point blank. Didn't kill him, shockingly enough. But Andrew, after doing some time, he went away. Nicky Caruso didn't do anything for him. When he got out of prison, he didn't like, hey, like Andrew, I know you're out of prison. Let me help you out a little bit. You know, get you on your feet. Give you a little bit before until you get on your feet, rather. But Nicky Caruso didn't do shit for him. The guy who came to Andrew's aid was Billy Catolo, the guy I mentioned earlier, because Billy and Andrew were good friends, even though they were from different families. So Billy Catolo came to Andrew's aid, which ain't supposed to be the case. Your own family, your own captain is supposed to take care of you and your family, even while you're in prison. That didn't happen. So Andrew felt like, lack of a better term, he got fucked. So he said, what am I doing here? I'm running around doing this shit for Nicky, and Nicky doesn't even help me out. Doesn't do anything for me. Doesn't send me an envelope when I get out to get me on my feet. Similar thing with Henry Hill. Henry Hill, same thing. I'll discuss him in a minute. So Andrew decided, well, if they're not going to help me, and I got to risk myself and go away, and they're not going to give me anything to help me out, why should I help them out? Andrew was looking out, hate to say it, for himself, because Nicky Caruso was doing the same thing. That's the odd thing about this life. You say you're a family, but the family doesn't help you. So that's one of the things that deteriorated the mob in general, was one of these issues. Henry Hill, who I'm not a big fan of, to tell you the truth, I even met him at one time. To me, he was a punk. The Goodfellas, they made him look like a king. Ray Liotta was way too good looking for him. But Henry, same idea. Here's Henry, who was a drug addict, nothing more than an errand boy for the Paulie Barrios crew. But he did know a lot of stuff. He knew a lot of information, and the family kind of like dropped him. And when he went away, same situation. The family didn't help his family, help his wife or his kids. So same idea. He turned on them just like they turned on him. So it was a survival tactic. All these guys that I just mentioned, it's all about survival. It's either them or you. So it's the same idea, I believe. So I wouldn't say call them rats. I'm going to mention just one more person who's actually a very good friend of mine, Johnny A. A lot of people may not like him. Oh, he's this, he's no good, he's a liar. Well, if people did their due diligence to learn a little bit more about this guy, maybe they shut their mouth. Now, John A. was Albanian, not even a made guy. when indictments were coming down, Johnny A. Light left the country and went to Europe to hide. He went on the lam, as they say. And after he spent some time bouncing around Europe, he ended up in Brazil. And he did what he did in New York. You know, he was doing loan sharking, extortion, whatever he did in New York. He was doing street stuff in Brazil, but he got busted in Brazil. Not for what he was doing, not what he did in New York, but what he was doing in Brazil. And he ended up being locked up in one of the worst prisons in the world, Rio Franco, in Brazil. The worst prison, bro. Worst. Most corrupt, dirty, filthy. They beat up the prisoners. They rape them. You have no idea. So here's a guy who's in the worst prison in the world. Albanian. Didn't take the oath of America. Basically, he can do whatever the fuck he wants. He's an associate. He's not a member. He really has no, I forgot the word I'm looking for here, but no loyalty. There's no loyalty that he needs to have for the family because he never got inducted. But he kept his mouth shut. Didn't say anything. And the U.S. found out he's in Brazil, and they extradited him to Florida. When he got to Florida, the FBI sat him down and said, listen, John, you showed him paperwork. 30, 40 guys ratted him out in New York. Guys that he knew, guys that he was working with. John Jr. himself, Crawford, meaning he sat down with the government. Ronnie One-Arm Truccio, who was working with Johnny A. Light, ratted him out. And another 20, 30 other guys. So, put yourself in his shoes. You just came from the worst prison in the world. You got extradited, kept your mouth shut, and here you are, the feds are telling you, from what we have, you can do 2 life terms. Or you can help us. Now, guys are watching this, people watching this, what would you do? Put yourself in his shoes. Would you do 2 life terms for these assholes who ratted you out? While you're on the lam, you're not saying nothing? What would you do? So I understand what he did. It's not, again, not because he's my friend. It's because this is a fact. This is truth. So, and I'm going to tell you a little quick story about something that happened to him while he was in Rio Franco. In Rio Franco, the correction officers sometimes grab the prisoners and they throw them in a room with no windows, no lights, nothing, pitch black. They throw you in there and they beat the shit out of you. Then they drag you back to your cell. They did that to him once. The second time around, he said, I'm not going to let them do this to me again. So he knew this was coming. So he threw them, actually, before he went in there, I know it's going to sound a little disgusting, but it's a fact. He took a shiv, which is like a knife. They call it a shiv in prison. And he stuck it up his ass, believe it or not. And when they came in to beat him up, he pulled it out and stabbed every one of those correction officers. So imagine going through something like that and still not saying a word, keeping your mouth closed. So who's more honorable? John A. Light or John Jr. who sat with the government? Think about it. Who's the real rat? Well, anyway, gentlemen and ladies, I hope you enjoyed this version. I hope I didn't insult anybody, but I'm just speaking the truth and what is fact. I hope you enjoy it. Please leave your comments, likes, shares, subscribe. We definitely would appreciate it. Soon we're going to be having some guests on the show eventually, and we should make it a lot more interesting. Thanks, guys. Take care. This is Nick Chrysalis, Mobtails.